Hello, my name is Jared Skeens and welcome to Quick Fix. Let's look at our IGCSE, Cambridge IGCSE 2020 May-June series, paper 41. This is the 2.5-hour long test. Again, this is 2020 is new syllabus and the May-June is the first series for that. And we see the time is still the same and the total number of points, 130 points, is still the same as the old syllabus. So let's get started and work our way through this. Question number 1, A, in 2018, Gretel earned $32,000. She paid tax of 24% on these earnings. Work out the amount she paid in tax in 2018. So 24% on your earnings basically means of your earnings, which you multiply and you get $7,680. Then in 2019, her earnings increased by 7%. So work out her earnings. Whenever you have a percent increase or decrease, you need to add or subtract it from the original value, which is represented by 1 or 100%. So increase by 7, you add 1 to the 7% as a decimal and you get 1.07. And then, so 32,000 times the increase, the 1.07, equals 34,240. In B, Gretel invests $5,000 at a rate of 2% per year compound interest. Calculate the value of her investment at the end of 3 years. So here's our compound interest formula. Our amount after 3 years will equal 5,000, which is our initial investment, sometimes referred to as the principal, times our 1, which represents the 100% of the original 5,000, plus a rate of 2% increase, so plus 0.02, raised to the power of 3 for the 3 years. Just plug that into your calculator and you get $5,306.04. Letter C, 1 month, Gretel spends a total of $360 on presents. She spends 1/5 of this total on presents for her parents. So 360 divided by 5 is 72. She spends 2/3 of the remaining money on presents for her friends. Well, we just need to subtract the 72 from the original 360. We get $288 left. She spends 2/3 of this remaining $288, which comes out to $192 she spends on friends. Then subtract that from the 288, we get 96 that she spends the rest of it for her sisters. So that's 96. Calculate the percentage of the 360 that she spends on presents for her sisters. So that's 96 out of the 360, which comes to 0.26 repeating. And as a percent would be 26.7%. And it's to 3 significant figures. Letter D, Arjun earned $36,515 in 2019. This was an increase of 9% of his earnings in 2018. So again, your increased 9% would be 1.09. Work out his earnings for 2018. So the 1.09 is an increase over last year's earnings, or the 2018, the previous year, 2018 year's earnings, equals the 36,515 that he got in 2019. Divide by 1.09 and you get 33,500. Letter E, Arjun and Gretel each pay rent. In 2018, the ratio of the amount each paid in rent was Arjun to Gretel, 5:7. In 2019, excuse me, bless me. In 2019, the ratio of the amount each paid in rent was Arjun to Gretel, 9:13. So notice the total of this top one is 12. The total of this bottom one is 22. Arjun paid the same amount of rent in both 2018-2019. Gretel paid $290 more rent in 2019 than she did in 2018. Work out the amount Arjun paid in 2019. Well, this is a little complicated because you're dealing with two ratios from two different years. One person stays the same, the other one changes. And so since we are working out Arjun's payment, let's make his X. Okay, so the amount that he pays is going to be X. And notice it's the same for either year. And then if we work with this first ratio of 5:7, then that means that his amount would be, if you divided it by 5, that would be the individual share, and then multiplied it by 7, that would be Gretel's total. Okay, so taking Arjun's amount, dividing it by 5, that's his ratio, would give you the individual share amount, and then times by 7, because Gretel has 7 shares, would give her amount for 2018. Then we take that, and her amount from 2018 increased by $290 for 2019. Then we take that and divide it by 13 to get her individual share for 2019, and multiply it by 9, because Arjun has 9 shares in 2019, and that will equal to X again, because Arjun's amount did not change. Now we multiply the 13 to the other side, divide by 9, and so we have this. Now we multiply everything by, we combine our 7/5 X, subtract it from our 13/9 X, so 13X over 9 minus the 7X over 5 is 2/45X equals the 290, divide by the 2/45, and that gives us the amount for Arjun that he paid either year was $6,525. Number 2, here we have this grouped data. The heights, H meters of the 120 boys in an athletics club are recorded. The table shows information about the heights of the boys. So they go between 1.3 meters all the way up to 1.9 meters, and the frequency of them. Notice this is continuous data. The numbers are the same at the beginning of each group. So this is already continuous data. AI, write down the modal class. Modal means most frequent. So the highest frequency is the one with the 30. And so that has the boundaries of 1.5 to 1.6. Then calculate an estimate of the mean height. So to do an estimate of the mean height, we need our mid-class values. So to represent each group, we take the middle. So 1.35, 1.45, 1.55, 1.65, 1.75, and 1.85, and multiply them by their respective frequencies and add them all up. So the sum of the mid-class values times their respective frequency divided by the total frequency, which is 120, gives us 1.623, or 1.62 meters is the expected average. BI, one boy is chosen at random from the club. Find the probability that this boy has a height greater than 1.8 meters. Well, here's 1.8 right here. So if you're greater than that, that means you would be in this last grouping. There are 14 boys in this last grouping. So 14 out of the 120 total gives us a 7 out of 60 probability for that particular requirement. II, 3 boys are chosen at random from the club. Calculate the probability that one of the boys has a height greater than 1.8 and that the other 2 have a height of 1.4 or less. So notice here's the 1.4 or less would be the first category here. And there was only seven of those. So there are 3 different ways these boys can be selected. The tall one first and the 2 shorter ones next, or short, tall, short, or the 2 shorter ones and the taller one last. So 3 different ways of doing that. If we just take this first pathway here, a tall one would be 14 out of the 120. Then that means there's only 119 boys left. There were 7 that were in that shorter category, so 7 out of 119 would be the probability for the second. And then the third one, there's now only 118 boys left, and there's only 6 left for that shorter category. Multiply all those together, times by 3, because there's 3 different pathways that can happen, and you end up with 21 out of 20,060. Moving on to part C, use the frequency table on page 4 to complete the cumulative frequency table. So we have to add them up. So 7 plus 18 is 25, and then 7, and then the next one is 30, so we add 30 onto that, we get 55, and so on, so on. You keep adding them as you go until you get to 120. If your number at the end is the same as the total, then you probably did it correctly. On the grid, draw a cumulative frequency diagram to show this information. Remember, with cumulative frequency, you graph the frequency with the upper end of the class boundary. So the upper end is the 1.4. So at 1.4, you put 7. At 1.5, you put 25. And so on. At 1.6, you put 55. All the way up until you get to 120. You should have kind of an elongated S shape. This one's quite stretched out. It's a little difficult to see that S. There's a little curve down here and a slight one up here. But generally speaking, cumulative frequency has an elongated S shape to it. Then we want to answer some questions. Use your diagram to find an estimate for the median height. Well, the median is the middle, so the middle out of 120 is 60. Notice I use a straight edge to draw a line across, and then right at where it connects to the graph, draw a line straight down, and I get 1.62. Each of these are worth 0.1, so 1.62, and the answer actually could be between 1.62 to 1.63. Then find the 40th percentile. 40% of 120 is 48, so I come up here to 48, follow it across and down, and I get to 1.58, and again it allows between 1.57 to 1.58. Here we have an equation, and all you have to do is just plug in the values and calculate it out. Of course, it's making sure that you follow the proper order of operations with your exponent, multiplication, addition, and when you plug all that in correctly, you should get 75.6. Here, B, simplify, and this is just combining like terms, so 3a minus a is 2a, negative 5b plus 2b is a negative 3b, and so these are not like terms, so you have to leave them separate, 2a minus 3b. Part 2, here we have 5 over 3x times 9x over 20. You just multiply straight across, get 45x over 60x. The x's cancel, and the 45 over 60 reduces to 3/4. Here we have solve. 15 over x equals negative 3. Multiply the x to the other side to get rid of the fraction. Divide by negative 3, and x equals negative 5. Here we have part 2, where we multiply the 4 through the parenthesis. Multiplication does distribute over add or subtract. So we have 20 minus 12x equals 23. Subtract 20 gives you 3. divide by negative 12 gives you a negative 3/12, which reduces to a negative 1/4. Here we have a simplify, where we have an exponent raised to an exponent. Remember, exponents distribute to multiply, so that 2/3 needs to go to the 27 and to the x to the 9th. Your 27 raised to the 2/3 power. Well, if you do it in your mind, you're just cube rooting. The bottom number is the root. So you're cube rooting 27, which gives you 3, and then 3 squared is 9. Or you can do it on your calculator. When you have an exponent raised to an exponent, you multiply. So you get 18 over 3, which is 6. So you have 9x to the 6th. Here we have an expand. So we just multiply your binomial expansion. 3x times 2x is 6x squared. 3x times y is 3xy. 2x times negative 5y is negative 10xy. And 3x, or negative 5y times y, is a negative 5y squared. These two middle ones are like terms and simplify to a negative 7xy. And there's your 3 terms of the expansion, 6x squared minus 7xy minus 5y squared. On to the next question, here we have a transformations types question. For part A, draw the image of t after a reflection of the line y equals negative 1. So here's our t, that's our object. And then we want to make the image. So we reflect it over y equals negative 1, which means it crosses the y-axis at negative 1. It's a horizontal line. So all you have to do is count from each vertex perpendicularly to your line of reflection, and then do the same thing on the other side. So this point is 2 away, go 2 to the other side. This one up here is 3 away, go 3 to the other side. This point at the front is 2 away, so go 2 to the other side. And there's your 3 points. So this is your image reflected over the line y equals negative 1. Part B, draw the image of triangle T after a rotation through 90 degrees clockwise about the 0, 0. So again, T is our object. We want to draw the image after T is rotated clockwise 90 degrees, which means it's going to give us a perpendicular to the center of rotation, which is at 0, 0. So notice this is perpendicular, and so we just have one diagonal here and one diagonal up to that point. And then notice this is 3 units long, so just count 3 units up and 1 unit across to get your 3 points there. And so this is the image of T rotated 90 degrees clockwise. Then describe fully the single transformation that maps triangle T onto triangle A. Well, if you notice, all this has been done from T to A is just sliding it over here. So that's a translation. And for a translation, all you need is the X and Y components, which I have put into a column vector. So start here at the front, count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so it is over 5, down 6. The top number is your X component, the bottom one is the Y component. Then here we have a Venn diagram. X is an integer. The elements are between and including 41 to 50, where that's all the elements. So in our circle A are going to be odd numbers. In circle B, multiples of 3. And in circle C, only prime numbers. Complete the Venn diagram. Now remember, you don't have to have a number in every single area, but those are possible outcomes. So we start with 41. 41 is odd, and it also happens to be prime. So it overlaps between the A and the C. It is not a multiple of 3. Then you go to 42. 42 is not odd, and it's not prime, and it is a multiple of 3. Then there's 43 is odd and prime, but again, not a multiple of 3. 44 is none of those. It's not odd, it's not a multiple of 3, it's not prime, so it goes in this outer area. So, again, you go through each number. Here's 45. 45 is odd, and it is a multiple of 3, but not prime. And 46 is out here. 47 is, again, both odd and prime. 48 is a multiple of 3, but obviously, since it's even, it's not odd or prime. And 49 is over here. It's odd. It is not prime, and it is not a multiple of 3. And then here is 50. 50, remember 49 is divisible by 7. 7 times 7, so it's not prime. 50 is not divisible by 3. It's not odd, and it's not prime. So here's all the placement of your numbers. So list A intersect C. The upside down kind of U, a U would be union, so an upside down U is the intersection of A and C, which are these numbers here, 41, 43, and 47. List the elements of not, that's the little prime on the outside, not B union C. So B union C would be all of these. So then these 4 out here would be the not. So you have 44, 46, 49, and 50. And then for letter C is find the number of elements. N means the number, how many elements are at the intersection of A, B, and C. In other words, has to intersect all 3. And if you look right here in the middle, the intersection of A, B, and C, there's nothing there. So that's 0. Don't put null set. This is asking for the number, how many. So there are 0 numbers. They might accept null set, but we'll leave that to them. Number 6, we are to write down the other inequality. It says Rahim makes baskets and mats. Each week he makes X baskets and Y mats. So here are the restrictions. He makes fewer than 10 mats. So that's the equation they gave. Y being mats is less than 10. That's the fewer than. And the number of mats he makes is greater than or equal to the number of baskets he makes. So here's the number of mats, Y, greater than or equal to the number of baskets, which is X. Now he takes 2.5 hours to make a basket and 1.5 hours to make a mat. So 2 1/4 hours is 9/4 for X, and 1.5 is 3/2 for Y. And he only works for a maximum of 22.5 hours. That means his total number of hours has to be less than or equal to, he cannot go over, that would be the max, 22.5. Show that 3x plus 2y is less than or equal to 30. Well, all we need to do is clear out our fractions, multiply everything by 4. That gives us 9x plus 6y is less than or equal to 90. Hopefully you can see that all of these can be divided by 3 to get the simplified equation there, 3x plus 2y less than or equal to 30. Moving on, draw on the grid, draw these three straight lines and shade the unwanted regions to show these inequalities. So here we have the y less than 10. So we come down, here's our 10. Notice it said less than, it did not have the equal to. So it crosses the y-axis at 10. Since it doesn't have the equal to, it is a dotted line, not a solid line. So be careful of that. Then we also have our y greater than or equal to x. Now it has the equal to, so that's going to be a solid line, which if y equals x, then that means the 1, 1, 2, 2 starts at 0. That's your y-intercept with a slope of 1. So you just go all the way up here to the corner, going by up 1 over 1, and use your straight edge to draw a solid line through that. Then our bottom one is 3x plus 2y less than or equal to 30. So 30 divided by 3 is 10. So we have a 10 on the x-axis. And 30 divided by 2 is 15. So we have a 15 on the y-axis. And it says less than or equal to. So it is a solid line. And we do the shadings in the opposite direction of the inequality, because it says to shade the unwanted regions. So the region that you should have left after you shade the unwanted, that means opposite from the inequality, and this region over here is your feasibility region. Now, it says he makes a profit of $40 on each basket and $28 on each mat that he sells. So this one is our profit formula, 40 times x plus 28 times y. And we want to maximize our profit, our objective here. So what we want to do is we want to go to our feasibility region and we want to find the corners. Obviously 0, 0 is not going to give you a maximum. Usually the lower corners are for minimum, the upper corners are for maximum. Here we have the 0.66. Now for up here, because this is not equal to, you can't use this. Notice I put little X's there. Don't use those corners because this is a not equal to line. And because we're dealing with whole mats and whole baskets, you can't have a decimal or fraction. So you have to go to the next integer value, which is 9. And this one over here. So you go to this point here, and our 6, 6. So this one is 4, 9, this is 0, 9, 4, 9, and 6, 6. And you plug those in. Here's 4, 9, and you get 412. 6, 6 gives us 408. So the 4, 9 is our highest point away here in this direction, our highest point. It gives us our maximum value of 412 is the maximum profit that we can make within our feasibility region. Moving on to bearings. Here we have a bearings question. The diagram shows the position of 3 points, A, B, and C in a field. A shows that BC is or show that BC, that's what we have to come up with a value, that BC is 118.1 meters correct to the 1 decimal place. Well, if you look at our original diagram before I wrote all over it, you have sides of 80 and 115 and an angle of 72. However, we do not have a side and its corresponding angle. So that means we need to use the law of cosines. And we want to find this side over here and it's opposite the angle that we have. So that is going to be our x squared equals 80 squared, the one side, and then 115 squared, the other side, minus 2 times 80 times 115 times cosine of the angle that is across from the side we're solving for. Cosine is 72. You can basically plug that all straight in into your calculator and get one answer. 13,939.0873 square root, and you get your 18.06, which rounds up to 18.1 to 1 decimal place. Now it wants us to calculate the angle of ABC, which is this angle up here next to the B. And now that we have a side with an angle, we can now use the law of sines. So the 118.064 divided by sine of 72 equals 115 over sine B. Notice the 115 is opposite the angle B. Cross multiply, so sine B times the 1018 equals 115 times the sine of 72. Divide that 118 to the bottom so that the sine B is by itself, and then do the inverse sine of that value, and your B ends up being 67.9 degrees to the 1 decimal point. Going on, the bearing of C from A is 147. So let's go back here. C from A is 147. So from here, from north, from A, facing north, going clockwise until you're facing C, that is 147. Now notice there's already a 72 here, so I subtracted the 72 to get 75. 75 and 72 make 147. And then it says, find the bearing of A from B. So we want to start from B and go around until we are facing the A. So what we have here is 147 minus the 72 gives us 75. And then 180 plus the 75 gives us 255. So what did we have here? The 147. The 147 is all of this minus the 75 gave us, or minus the 72 gave us the 75. Okay, that's this here. And then, so because this is transversal across parallel lines, it means that 75 is actually the angle from here all the way down to here. It's this and this. So alternate interior angles are equal. So that gives you the 75. And then, so that 75 goes all the way to the south part here. It doesn't stop at this dark line. It goes all the way to the south here because of this alternate interior from north to line, from line to south. And then 180, which is from north all the way around 180 plus the 75 gives us the 255. Then the bearing of B from C. So notice that we already calculated this 67.8765. That is the B part. That's just the part in here. The 75 was all the way to south. This 67.8 is what is the actual B value. So if we want B from C, here is C, B from C. All we want to go is just that little bit right there. So the angle here, let's get back here, are 75 minus the 67, the 75, which is all of this, minus the 67.8, which is just in here, gives us this little tiny sliver here. And that little tiny sliver is the alternate interior angle to down here. That's because these are parallel lines cut by a transversal. This little tiny bit here is this little tiny bit here. So the 75 minus the 67.87 gives us the 7.12, and so that is our bearings from C going north. I didn't draw it in, but from north, drawing it in just this little bit, just over here to face B, is only 7. Remember, with bearings, technically they're supposed to be 3 number values, so it should be 007, and then 0.12 are the decimals. Letter D, Mitchell takes 35 seconds to run from A to C. Calculate his average running speed in kilometers per hour. So from A to C was 115 meters, and he runs that in 35 seconds. We want to change that to kilometers per hour. So 115 meters, we want to divide by 1,000 meters and make that 1 kilometer. So that cancels out our meters. And then our seconds, 60 seconds in 1 minute, 60 minutes in 1 hour. That gets rid of our seconds and minutes so that we're now in hours. Multiply this all the way out and you get 11.8 kilometers per hour. Calculate the shortest distance from point B to AC. Okay, so shortest distance will be perpendicular distance. Shortest distance from point B to the line AC will make a perpendicular line. And we already have the 72, and we also already have the 80 for our right triangle here. So all we need is, and I listed it here as Y because we already used X over here. So I called this Y. We're looking for that distance. So our sine of 72 equals Y over 80. And then you just multiply by 80 sine 72, and your shortest distance is 76.1 to 3 significant figures. Going on, now we have some trigonometric graphing. This is part of the new material to the new syllabus, is basic trig graphing. So on the axis, sketch the graph of y equals sine x over the domain of 0 to 360. They already put the 0 to 360 for you. They also already put the amplitude of 1 and -1. So all you have to do is basically graph the quadrantal values. Sine at 0 is 0, sine of 90 is 1, sine of 180 is 0, sine of 270 is -1, and sine of 360 is back to 0 again. And then just draw your curve, concave down for this one, concave up for this side, and there's your basic sine graph. Describe fully the symmetry of the graph y equals sine x over that interval. And so it has what's called rotational symmetry at the center point. So in other words, if you rotate this diagram in a circular direction centered at the 180 or the 180, 0, if you put it as coordinates, then this point over here will rotate over and become this point here on the 360, and this point on the 360 will rotate over here and become the 0 here. Likewise, the 1 will rotate over to -1, the -1 will rotate over to +1. And so since there are two places, the original place and the rotated place at which they look identical, it means that it has an order of 2. So rotational symmetry, order 2, from a center of 180, 0. Now we want to solve this trigonometric equation. Remember that trigonometric equations follow algebraic rules up until the point of where you do the trig function. So we add 1 to both sides to get 3, divide by 4 to get 3/4. Now we do the inverse sine of 3/4. And on your calculator, that's going to give you the 48.6 degrees. However, your calculator only gives you one value. So remember, your all students take calculus, and sine is positive in both the first and second quadrants. So we need to find that second quadrant value. So you need to subtract. I should have wrote it on here. I don't know why I didn't write it on here so that you could see it. I guess I just used to doing it in my head. So your second quadrant goes all the way up to 180. So we want to go 180 minus the 48.6 to give you a 131.4. So that 131.4, you get that by taking 180 minus the 48.60, and that's because sine is positive, 3/4 is positive in both the first and the second quadrant. So 48.6 is the first quadrant, then you put 48.6 in the second quadrant, which means you have to go backwards from 180 to get to the 131.4. Remember to always use your x-axis as your point of reference. Do not use the 90 and 270 as your reference. That's the y-axis. Letter C, write x squared plus 10x plus 14 into this x plus a squared plus b form. This is the complete the square. So that means we need to move this 14 over. It does not work. It does not allow that to factor into a perfect square. So we move the 14 over. We follow the formula to find that magic number there, the b divided by 2 squared. So 10 divided by 2 is 5, squared is 25. So b divided by 2 squared, that is your formula to find the magic number for completing the square. Then don't forget you need to also equalize it over here. So you have plus 25, you need to also have a minus 25 to maintain equality. And this left side now factors into a perfect square. It's x plus 5 squared. And the right side reduces to negative 11. So here you have your form, x plus 5 squared minus 11. And then the reason why you want to complete the square is you can identify the vertex. Remember the number attached to the variable, you do the opposite sign. The number not attached to the variable keeps the same sign. So the vertex is at negative 5, negative 11, which is right here. You can draw in the numbers yourself, your scale. So it says to sketch it. Once you have your vertex, then just plug in an easy number. 0 is easy to plug in because you just get 0, 0, 14. And then make it symmetrical over your line of symmetry, which runs right up through the vertex. You're 5 away from the origin, so go 5 on the other side, which will be to negative 10, and it will be also at the 14 mark. So now that you have your 3 key points, just draw your graph through that. Here at number 9, we have the diagram shows a sector of a circle with center O, radius 8, and a sector angle of 165. So it wants us to calculate the total perimeter of this sector. So your perimeter is going to be OA plus arc AB plus B back to the origin. Well, obviously OA and OB are quite easy. That's just the radius there, 8 and 8. Now what we need to do is find arc AB. So arc AB, now using degree formula, because we need to use degrees here, is 165 out of 360, which is a complete circle, times 2 pi r, which is your circumference of a complete circle. So the 165 out of 360 gives you what fraction of the circumference that you have, 2 pi r, r being 8, and multiplied by this fraction gives you 23.038. Plug that into your little formula for perimeter, and you get 39.04, or just 39.0 to 3 significant figures. Now to find the surface area of a sphere that has the same area of the sector. So we need to find our area of the sector, 165 out of 360, now times pi r squared, because we're dealing with area of a sector, and the area of a circle is pi r squared. This is the fraction of the circle we have, equals 92.153. This is equal to the area of a sphere, which is 4 pi r squared. They give that formula to you. Now we want to solve for the radius. So divide by 4 pi and then square root to get the r by itself. 2.71 is your radius. Going on, here is a cone is made from that sector. Cone is made from that sector by folding that sector around until it makes a cone, which means that the circumference of the cone is equal to the perimeter, or sorry, the circumference of the cone, the circular base, the circumference of the circular base will be equal to the arc length of the cone. Because when you take B and pull it around here to A, then this arc length becomes the entire circumference. So 23.038, you already have it right there. Bring that down here, equals to 2 pi r, which is your circumference now of the base of the cone, and your radius, find the radius of the cone is 3.67 to 3 significant figures. Part II, calculate the volume of the cone. Well, we need to find the height, so 8 squared minus the 3.67 squared. I did 3.666 to get more significant figures, and the height comes out to 8.1106 there. So the 8 squared minus the r squared gives the h squared. H is 7.1106. Plug that into your volume formula, 1/3 pi r squared times height gives you a volume of 100.07. Remember that zeros between numbers or zeros where there is a decimal are significant. So these are zeros between significant numbers. So to 3 significant figures would just be 100. Those are significant figures. 10, a rhombus has a diagonal AC where A is the point -310, C is the point 4, -4. Calculate the length of AC. So we just use our distance formula to find that. So x1 minus x2 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So x2 minus x1, y2 minus y1, square them, add them together, and square root. This is just your a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Your distance formula is based on your Pythagorean theorem. And you work this out, and you get 15.65. Remember, square roots do not distribute over add or subtract, so you cannot cancel these squares with your square root. Square roots only distribute to multiply and divide. So you'd follow this, you get 15.7. Now down here, show that the equation of line AC is y equals -2x plus 4. Well, first we need to verify that slope. So we take our A and C, do our y2 minus y1 and over x2 minus x1, and we get -14/7, which is a -2. And then we plug in either one of our points. I took the -310, plugged it in for the x and the y, and to calculate that C is +4, plug those into our y equals mx plus c formula, and we get the equation of the line they asked us to find. Find the equation of the line BD. Well, we need to go back up and look at what BD is. Oops. ABCD is a rhombus. So AC is one diagonal, so that means BD would be the other diagonal going the other way. So where are we at right here? Find the equation of the line BD. So it's the other diagonal, and rhombus diagonals are perpendicular to each other. So because the diagonals of rhombus are perpendicular, we can take our slope, take the negative reciprocal, and get 1/2. Then we need to find the midpoint of AC. That's also going to be on that diagonal cross section there, where they cross. So the midpoint of AC, so do the 2 x's divided by 2, the 2 y's put together divide by 2, you get 1/2 3. So you plug in that for your x and your y, the 1/2 for x, the 3 for your y, and you can figure out that your C is 11/4, and that then is your equation for BD. So it is perpendicular to AC, and it goes through the midpoint of AC. Part B, a curve has the equation y equals x cubed plus 8x squared plus 5x. Work out the coordinates of the 2 turning points. So that's your stationary points. Turning points and stationary points are the same thing. That means we need to do the derivative. So here's our original up here, y. So that means our derivative is going to be y prime. Derivative, you multiply the exponent to the front. So 3 times 1 is 3. And then you subtract 1 from the exponent and you get 2. Going into the next term, 2 times 8 is 16. Subtract 1 from the exponent, you get an understood 1. Here you have a 1 as your exponent multiplied by 5, you get 5. When you subtract 1 from 1, you get 0, and anything to the 0 power is 1. 1 times the 5 is still 5. So here's the derivative. We want to set that equal to 0. Why? Because the turning point, the high point, and the low point have a tangent that is horizontal. And if you have a horizontal tangent, then that means the slope is 0. So we set our derivative, which represents slope, equal to 0. So we factor it, solve it. We find out there are 2 points, one at -1/3 and one at -5. Plug those back into the original function so that we can find the corresponding y coordinate. So when you plug in a -1/3, you get -22/27. And when you plug in a -5 into the original equation, the y equals, then you get 50. So our two coordinates are -1/3, -22/27, and -5/50. Then it says determine whether each of the turning points is a maximum or a minimum. So we don't know which one they are. So we need to, there are actually a couple of ways of doing this. The way that I prefer is the second derivative test. So I do the second derivative. So notice if you take your 2 times the 3, you get 6x. And then the 1 times 16 is just 16. So you get 6x plus 16 is the second derivative. The y double prime here means second derivative. And then we plug in the x coordinates, the -1/3 and also the -5. And for the -1/3, when we plug it in, we get 14, which is greater than 0, meaning it's positive. So draw a little smiley face, positive people smile. And so at the bottom of this smiley face, that is a minimum for this one. For the -5, when you work that through, you get -14, which is less than 0, which is negative. So you have a frowny face, and that at the top of the frown, you have a maximum for the -5/50. Okay, and that is the end of our 2020 May-June series, paper 41. So I hope that helps you work your way through and understand the IGCSE syllabus material. Again, as always, thank you for watching and hope to see you again next time.